My friend Paul Seegert is joining us now, PCS Advisors. He is a healthcare expert. Hey, Paul, how are you, buddy?
Great. How are you, Leland?
I'm good. Your reaction real quick to the Supreme Court's ruling today about the mandate of employers. Basically, the Supreme Court now saying, hey, the OSHA cannot tell employers that they have to vaccinate their employees. What do you think?
Well, I think it's expected. The OSHA doesn't have a good track record of using this emergency standard authority, and this is the biggest attempt they've made to use it, the furthest reaching. And so it's not a huge surprise. It'll go back down to the Sixth Circuit where they'll get the same outcome.
Right. I feel like the Supreme Court did the right thing here because their logic essentially was, look, this is a universal threat, not a specific workplace threat. So that then, in fact, creates basically gives OSHA way more authority than Congress ever intended to give them, because it takes it from a specific workplace situation to literally national public health policy.
Right, and there's the Congress. They're there for some of this stuff potentially, and they've passed, American Rescue Plan and so on, and did not include any of this pretty conspicuously.
Yeah, actually, it was Gorsuch, I think, brought that up and said, hey, look, Congress has had an entire year to do this. That's their purview. They didn't act. How is this an emergency?
And states have the ability to enact certain rules in their own states. Employers have the freedom. In fact, it's really ironic how this has impacted the system, because if you'd asked me before the OSHA mandate was announced how many employers would have a policy in place by the end of last year, they were reporting, and there's lots of old polls you can pull up with Google, 85% were saying they were going to have some form of a mandate, and then they put it on hold largely because they didn't want to build one that didn't match the ruling that eventually was going to get released by OSHA. And now only 18% do, and another 7% say they will.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Given now that it's sat there for a year, and more information has, despite the government's best efforts, come out about the vaccine, people are now a lot more hesitant than they were at the beginning to take the vaccine. Therefore, there's more pushback. That also negative public relations for companies that have pushed their employees out as a result of their choice about the vaccine. It's stewed for a year. Ironically, if they had not tried the heavy hand, and if they had just sat back, probably most employers would currently have a vaccine mandate of their own, and there wouldn't be any question, and it would be a de facto national mandate. Now, there's probably not going to be anything close to that, is what you're telling me based on those polls.
Yeah, we're going to end up with 25 or 30% of employers is what they are reporting, and that's pretty recent data.
So bottom line, authoritarianism doesn't work?
It certainly didn't in this case.
Right. And I wanted to segue into that.
On the whole thing, they're scared. What if they do it and they can't staff their company?
Well, okay. Yeah, and they've seen the fallout. Everybody has seen now that hospital systems are scrambling for employees, and they're going, wait a minute, that could happen to me. And right now, we have shortages on grocery store shelves, and everybody's like, holy crap, if we have to send home 20 or 15, even 15% of our workforce, when you have this massive competition for a workforce, it's hard to hire people. The last thing you want to do is fire 5% of your workforce. Like, that could have a huge detrimental effect to you.
Huge impact.
Yeah.
Yep. One of the employers, so they can't do it.
Yeah. Along those lines, it's kind of interesting. Like when you look at this mandate, and now, so you're saying maybe 25 to 30% tops employees will have it, or employers will have it. How do you think that will affect the fight for workforces?
Well, that's going to give employees the option to say, I think I'd like to work somewhere else. And there'll kind of be a free market in that sense. And that's a large part of why we're only going to have that 25% or so, because they're already struggling to keep employees. Hardest hiring environment in 15 years. They cannot. And that, it's one thing if you're a massive airline with 67,000 people. It's another thing if you have 150 employees and you provide a really skilled service, employee and good people are hard to find. Can you lose even 2 or 3 of your best people? No.
Right. Along those lines, one of the reasons I originally asked you on, and it was before we got this ruling, I was expecting the ruling to come down at any point, but I also kind of wanted to talk to you about the craziness and the back and forth of the CDC's regulations. And I think part of that is driving that vaccine hesitancy, by the way. The fact that the government can't decide what we should and shouldn't do and what information they want to let out and what they don't want to let out, what they want to censor and what they don't want to censor, has caused people, again, it's the same thing. It's the same phenomena, right? The more authoritarian they are, the more people back away from this. It's an age-old principle. You try to tell somebody what to do, they won't do it. Why has the CDC been so confusing? Why have they not been able to get on a page since the beginning of this pandemic 2 years in?
Well, according to their own, the folks that are supposed to be leading us as a country through this whole thing, they've been noble lying. I think that was a phrase that Dr. Fauci came up with.
I love that.
To explain why he said no masks, then masks, then...
I'm a liar, but I tell noble lies. Yeah.
Yeah, it's because we need you to act a certain way, and we don't think you can handle the truth. And that has lost a lot of confidence. I mean, I wrote out all the different things that have changed significantly in their guidance throughout the pandemic, and it's more... It's not just explained by we got new information. Just as recently as our shortage in testing, you've got a crazy shortage in testing in the U.S. You can't just go down to the drugstore and spend $3 and get a test. But guess what? We do have U.S. companies manufacturing those tests that are still struggling to get through our FDA's approval process so that we can have access to those tests. They've already cleared the equivalent organizations' processes in Europe, and they're selling them in Europe. So you can go get a test made by an American company in Denmark for $3 and know at the end of your shortened quarantine period if you're still positive or not, and you can't get it here. And it's an American company sending it over there because we have just blown it, really. We went back to snail's pace and just went away from warp speed and went to let's do business as usual and take months to respond to applicants and let the bureaucracy reign.
Yeah, it's really asinine. What do you make of the fact that 2 years into a pandemic, we have no outpatient protocol? When I got COVID in September, my doctor told me, go home. I said, what do I do? He said, go home, treat it like a cold. Hopefully I won't hear from you in 4 or 5 days. Fortunately, he didn't.
Right.
But to me, that is a massive failure of what was once the world's greatest and most premier healthcare system, that our doctors are afraid to experiment and try to find ways with medications that we know are safe. We don't know for sure that they would help, but anecdotally they seem to. But we know that they're safe in prescription form, and doctors are afraid to do that. We have zero protocol for treating people to keep them out of the hospital, and I think when all the truth comes out, we're going to find out that literally probably as many as half or more of the deaths could have been prevented by quickly going with an all-hands-on-deck approach, as opposed to the vaccine or nothing approach.
Well, that's been our approach, very singular, and we were going to get everyone vaccinated, and then this thing would go away. And there were plenty of experts that said that was not possible, and we have highly promoted that and intentionally downplayed anything else, even therapeutics that were designed for treating COVID, monoclonal antibodies and antivirals that are just pills you can take that have now been shown to reduce hospitalization in high-risk groups by 90%.
Wow.
90% of them, we could put them they could go to the drugstore, pick up a bottle of pills and take an antiviral, and 90% they're not going to go to the hospital now. At obviously a much lower price tag than getting them in the hospital. Right. And we've failed to get supply of those things, just in the same way that we've failed to get supply of testing. And some of the reasons that the folks that are leading us through this give for that stuff is incredible. Like, they don't want to make testing available. If we had fast-acting tests, maybe people would be less willing to wear a mask because they would feel they don't need to. So let's not provide
which we now know a mask doesn't work. So we're trying to keep people from doing something that doesn't work anyway.
Right. Come on. Our own CDC director authored a paper in 2020, co-authored a paper where she said the fast-acting antigen tests are the ideal solution for shortening these isolation periods. Right. And now, because we've we haven't done the right thing and gotten supply of these things. She herself is out talking about why we're not using them because they're not FDA approved for that, when she told the FDA they should change their view on it.
Well, we're using vaccines
that's
that
the
are
kind of thing that loses confidence.
Yeah, and we're using vaccines that are not FDA approved. They're emergency authorization approved, but they're not fully FDA approved. There's a number of hurdles they have not gone through yet that every approved medication has to go through because we've done them so quickly. So that just makes no sense. And I think a lot of people see that and they just scratch their heads. So, well, look, great having you on. I appreciate you popping on with us. And turned out we had some breaking news to deal with as well. So that's pretty cool. Paul Seegert, as always, it's great talking to you and we appreciate your expertise.
Thanks. Have a great day.
All right, you too. Paul Seegert is a healthcare expert.